Hi, welcome to the Run Wales Run Leader Conference. This presentation is about a Run Leader Toolkit. We hope you find some useful ideas. So some introductions first of all. I'm Eva Brewer. I'm Participation Officer for Run Wales. And with me today I have Dave and Sarah. So Dave, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Dave. I am the coach for Moti Run Club Cardiff, member of the CDF Runners Committee and co-founder of the Cardiff Big Social Run and a member of the Brooks Run Happy UK team.
Lovely, thank you,
That's
Dave.
me.
And Sarah?
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm the run leader for the Lantwick Vardra Ladies Running Club, and that's me. I'm nice and easy.
Oh, brilliant, nice to welcome you. So as well as being participation officer for Run Wales, I'm also run leader at Will Runners, so one of our social running groups. I do actually coach as well for Prestatyn Running Club for their junior section as well. So going through what we're looking at today, we will be looking at setting up a group and what that involves, but also if you're a leader that's part of an established group, where you fit in with that. Also looking at communication and social media. So how do you communicate with your group members? How do you post events? How do you share information? And also make sure that that doesn't get on top of you and you're expected to be on there 24 hours a day. We'll be looking at session planning and good practice sharing. There's some lots of information there about planning sessions, adapting sessions, and also some great ideas that we've got after this conference and things that we'll be doing as an organisation with run leaders. We'll be looking at health and safety considerations, not only for the groups, but obviously in these difficult times with our COVID regulations. Also looking at you as run leaders and making sure that you look after yourself. It should be a fun role to have, it shouldn't be stressful, so we'll be making sure that we look after you too. And also finally we'll be looking at networking and continuous professional development. So again, sort of sharing ideas, how can you develop as a run leader, and some ideas around that. So first of all, decided to become a run leader, or you've been nominated to become a run leader. What we want to look at is, who is your target group? So I don't know, Dave, Sarah, do you want to sort of come in there and explain about how you set up your groups?
Well, I think if it's all right for me to start, I think obviously, what people will have found is that they've identified a bit of a need. They feel the need for a group, and you know, the chances are they know somebody else who does as well, and they're probably talking about it. You know, so I think that's all it kind of takes to begin with, and I think if they need it and one of their mates needs it, there's a good chance, you know, that that other people do as well. And you know, I think once they've identified that, then I think they'll probably find it very easy to realize that there are other people who would be interested in that. And you know, they could start thinking about some ideas about, well, where would they hold sessions if they were starting sessions, just some basic principles about what they might want to start.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, should I go on? Yeah, that's exactly how my group started up, was kind of talking to local people, local women at the rugby field, saying it'd be nice if we could meet up. And it took a few months of conversations and then talking about, you know, where could we run. So it's lots of little logistics to get in the right place. But just, I think it's having that passion that you want something as well, because as a run leader, you have to want it to be able to be involved in it and commit that time and energy as well. I think that's really important, that you're going to get something out of it as well as what you're giving to the group.
Yeah, you're probably running around talking about this stuff, aren't you? You know, at the early stages, that's the sort of genesis of the group, and it'll probably become a bit sort of self-evident. You know, like you're probably running in a particular place, you're probably doing certain things while you're running, like whether you might be just going out for an easy 5K or something, or maybe you're meeting up with a few people to do like interval sessions, that type of thing. And that, that is going to sort of form the identity of your group, I would imagine. And those conversations. And as Sarah said, I think there's no rush as well. It could take a few months. There's no rush on this. As you identify, what you would enjoy doing as a group, then you can develop it further, and you can reach a stage where you're saying, actually, we want to put it out there now, and we want to see if other people want to, get involved, and see if we can formalize this. Like, it sounds a sort of serious word. It doesn't have to be, though, but really sort of, formalize that idea of a club, and start to see if other people would like to come along as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes I know when I set up Real Runners, for example, there was many weeks where I stood on the prom by myself, not for want of advertising and things, which we'll get onto later. But sometimes groups can just form naturally. So I know, for example, one of my colleagues who runs junior sessions in South Wales, some of the parents got together and just, whilst the kids were involved with the junior athletics, they went for a run. So it's groups sort of getting together like that can just happen naturally, which are brilliant. So but yeah, so looking at, you like running, there might be other people out there as well in your local area that feel the same, and actually, it's good to have company. And as you say, so start small. If it's just you and one other person, that's great. Little things build from big things build from little acorns. I think that's the phrase.
That's it.
So looking at where you'll meet, I think this is really, really important. So it could be that you're naturally somewhere where you've got either the facilities to meet in terms of somewhere structured that you can meet. But also, I don't know if you two have any ideas about looking at what will happen over the course of the year. So, for example, I set up a group in a very small town in the middle of nowhere, and it was fine in the summer. There was adequate lights. We didn't need the lights, and there was adequate places to go. But as soon as dark nights sort of started coming on, we were really limited as to where we could go, because literally 5 minutes into our run, we'd be in the countryside. So it was too difficult to sort of carry on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the same I found with my...
No, carry on, Sarah. No, go on.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest starting points that held me back, because I just didn't know where to start the group from. I wanted somewhere that could easily be accessible by foot or by car. So people had that obstacle kind of ticked off their list, that if they had to drive and park, and they could do, but somewhere that was quick and easy to get on an off-road path, because I was doing a couch to 5K, and I know as a self-conscious new runner, you don't particularly want to be running along a roadside, and social runners want to be able to run near each other, so it's a wide path, quite important. So we found all of that, but unfortunately the path near us isn't lit. So of course, then when you're doing your nighttime runs, or as the dark nights come in, we've had to adapt it. And I think that evolves, and people, once your group's together and you start talking about routes, particularly if there's more experienced runners, or people who walk, even dog walkers, where's a good place to run and walk. So that can evolve as your group evolves as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You obviously you don't want it to get to the stage of there being too many chefs type of thing. But on the other hand, I think talking about this stuff with the group, really, really helps, and being open about it as well. There's no need, for example, let's say, just on the issue of, let's say, you think about the routes you have been doing and realize now it's too dark. There's no reason to sort of be thinking about that by yourself and worrying about it without actually just talking to the group about it.
Yeah.
And we come across this again and again. Actually, I think people value being involved. So actually saying, does anyone have an idea where would be a good place now that the nights are getting darker, etc.? And as you say, you're probably running anyway and talking about this stuff. And you know, if you're leading the group, you can sort of digest all these different ideas and then come up with a proposal. You know, ultimately, it's your sort of decision to like think about all these different options and make a decision, either yourself or with a couple of people. And that tends to naturally happen. But obviously, you know, yes, you do need to start thinking about, is this route always going to be suitable? And it leads on to our section on you know, safety considerations, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can just share that with the group and work through it together.
Yeah, definitely. So the other part of, if you're setting up a group yourself, is giving it a name. And I'm the most uninspired person, hence real runners. It's to the point. But sometimes that can come from either the group that you're with or the place that you are or the surroundings. So yeah, don't be afraid to be imaginative or keep it simple.
Yeah, I must admit, I think one of the best ones, I think, is Ogmore Phoenix Runners, because, and the reason I like that, it's lovely and dramatic, and it tells people where they are. They've managed to do both things. So, you know, it's whatever is appropriate, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it helps. It of course helps if the name describes what it is, you know. So
Yeah.
location, that's why location is so popular, because somebody will see the name and they will instantly know it's relevant to them.
Yeah.
But I do like these sort of nice dramatic names as well, you know, that you think, what does that mean? But it's great, you know.
Yeah, so like our former Run Wales Group of the Year, Cowbridge Movers, absolutely brilliant. You know,
That's superb.
have got the movement in there, they've got Cowbridge in there, they like their cow prints clothes as well. It's like genius. I'm not a genius like that. Okay, so
Brilliant name.
if you're already, if a group's already established, and you're a new run leader sort of coming in, what do you think would be the best advice for a new leader?
I think it's very easy to get a run leader qualification and do absolutely nothing with it, you know. And of course we do know statistically that happens a little bit in the past, which is changing a lot now. But I think actually two things that come to mind. One is, I think, to speak to the club, you know, whether that be, you know, the chairperson of the club or a committee member or however the structure works, and just, you know, be really sort of you know, put yourself forward in a manner that you're comfortable with, to say, I am interested in actually like acting on this and, you know, and contributing to the group. And my second point related to that really would be, I think it's a very good idea if a club can have support structures in place to get run leaders involved. So it might be that, you know, a new run leader is enthusiastic about taking a session, but a little nervous. So they might want to, you know, buddy up with somebody who's far more familiar with it the first couple of goes, you know, and just see how they get on, or just act in a supporting role maybe a couple of times, just to get a little bit, I think, you know, more comfortable with it. I think we're all familiar with that feeling, aren't we, where, you know, you're standing in front of a group and your mind is racing, not literally racing, but you know, you're just thinking, oh my goodness, you know, this, I've not done this before. Am I going to be able to manage it? So support for you to do that is really, really vital, I think. And you could, what you don't really want is that you have a group with run leaders there who are willing, but never make that known and never get asked either, you know. So that new qualification kind of goes to waste. So you don't want that happening. So support, I think. Yeah.
And I think from I'm a different perspective. I've generally, within what I've observed, my run leaders, I ask them if they want to be run leaders, because I've seen them taking on a more proactive, supportive role within the group. And I've asked them if it's something they're interested in, because they've already shown those abilities already. So it's almost organically, they become run leaders without doing the qualification. But I think it's almost making them aware of that it will take a bit more time and a bit more commitment to it, and checking they're okay with that. And also, what time and commitment have they got to give? Just so I'm not overusing them, they're not over. And I think that's, for the longevity of any club, that's really important to establish those clear boundaries.
Yeah,
that's really, I agree completely with that. I've just got funding for some LERF qualifications for MOTI, actually, and it's precisely as you say. I've got a number of people in the group who act as support and have done for like a couple of years, and everyone can rely on them, but they haven't had that qualification up till now, so it organically happens. And I've actually just yesterday, actually, I put together a document which is basically saying, I really want to offer you this opportunity as a thank you, apart from anything else, to have this funded place on the course. But also it would mean the following from you, so just be sure that you're happy with that, before you accept it. And I hope you are, but you don't have to,
and you'll find that, I know with my run leader, and I've got one in training as well, is that she brings something different to the group as well, and she's got different strengths, and we complement each other really, really well. So if I forget something, I know that she'll pick me up on it, or and we've got different ways. She's very, very bubbly and motivating, whereas I'm sort of not serious, but but I'm not quite as bubbly as she is. So I think making sure that we've already mentioned about adapting and really just not worrying, not to, it's not a page job. You're not expected to know everything. You learn things as you go along, and I'm still learning things. I'm sure you guys are as well, and whether it's about different types of run, different people, different routes, you keep learning.
Oh, absolutely. I was only talking about this the other night. Somebody was talking about like writing down key things, to remember. You're always learning, and you're always making mistakes as well, but it's not the end of the world. Like you say, it's not a paid role. You are like doing this for everyone's benefit, and also you have got a supportive audience. Your club members are coming to you because you're offering something that they want. And that's a nice way to look at it. It gives you a bit more confidence.
Yeah. Okay, right, so moving on, so we're going to talk about communication and social media, and obviously, I don't know about you guys, sometimes it feels like you're never off social media, but it's so powerful, whether it's about communicating about your group or club, talking about an event, sharing ideas. But also one of the things that we do at Real Runners is we actually congratulate people. It could be for completing a particular event, it could be for just keeping going and being encouraging to other people, and valuing all those people in the group. So we do group member of the month, and again, it's not about times or distance, things like that. It's about what they've done and things that are personal to them, really. But when you're setting up a group, or if you're part of a group, think about how those members will communicate. How will people get in touch with you as a run leader, but also how can they chat to each other? So we have our main one for Real Runners is a Facebook group. we don't really sort of use anything else. Everything's on Facebook. What about yourselves? What do you use?
I know, Dave. Go on, Dave. You're the social media guru. Go for it.
I wouldn't say that, but well, yeah. So at Moti and at CDF, we have Twitter and Instagram as well, but it very much on the same principles that Eva said, because there's number one, you want people to know your club exists, and you want them to know that they can come to the club. That's the very basics. And of course, you can start just with that, especially if we're talking about a new club. You just want a way for people to know that it's there and know what they need to do to come along. So don't be, don't think you've got to have all of this in place straight off. You may just have Facebook. We have found that it's becoming increasingly popular for people not to be on Facebook. So we do have a number of, we do have, if we send out information, we make sure that goes via email as well as Facebook, because we have members that aren't on it. But for those that use it, it is very powerful, because people want to feel invested in the club, and they are appreciative when you highlight things that they've done. And like Eva said, it doesn't have to be strictly to do with the club either. They could do something, I've a very good example. One of Moti's members, Sam Blacksland, he published a book recently on history of Swansea University. So I posted that up in the Run Club group because he's a member. So variety is quite important as well. And don't think you've got to be formal either. I very much doubt your run club is, or like the Queen's English when you're out on a run. So, the Facebook doesn't have to be either. This is fun after all. So, you do want your groups to reflect that as well, even though that, at the same time, you might be doing serious training. It can still be fun. So, but don't think, like I said, don't think that you've got to have all of that in place, because as we know, that does take time. So just having the basics there for what your group is, how people can join in, that meets the requirements to start with,
Yeah, I agree with Dave there. We're still very much Facebook based, and that seems to suit most of our members. But I have noticed, like Dave said, there's a few now that aren't comfortable with Facebook for whatever reason, but bizarrely they're more comfortable with Instagram. So we're trying to get those two platforms up and running. But what I think I have seen that's successful, pinching from one of the other clubs, the She Runs Cardiff, they actually have a little team that run their social media, and that seems to work brilliantly. It's their role, they're on top of it, they're keeping everybody informed all the time. So if you've got the capacity or somebody who's happy to do that within your clubbers or your group as it evolves, that seems to work really, really well.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And I've just popped on there about setting up an instant response message. I think it works well on Facebook. So if you're starting a new Couch to 5K group, for example, and you get lots of interest, that actually you can't physically respond all the time, but just setting up an instant message just gives people an idea that, yeah, we've got your message, but we'll be in touch as soon as we can.
Yeah, I think something else has just popped into my mind there as well, is that you obviously, with something so positive, you don't, as like starting a club and developing a club, people really excited, etc. There's two things. Like, firstly, I think your members start creating the content as well, which is absolutely brilliant. When you get to the stage where the group is being posted into without you having to do it, that's fantastic. It's taking on its own life.
Yeah.
But also, I think it is important, once you get past that very, very, very sort of beginning stage where it's only a couple of you, that time is actually the right time to actually set up some ground rules for the group as well. Now, and if you're using Facebook, that's really good, because with the groups feature, it actually suggests that you set up rules for the group. And that sounds really formal and it sounds really boring. And you just think, oh, never, never. But it does happen. So when you find that you need to remove something for the group, and that might just be some spam, you know, but if you have got the rules in place that everyone sees when they join, then you've got like a basis to remove things if you need to, and anyone can see that you're using like an objective criteria to do that.
Yeah.
If the rules aren't in place, then it looks like they're being made up as you go along. And they don't have to be complicated. You know, you can have 4 or 5 basic principles like no spam, no swearing, whatever, or compulsory swearing, whichever way around you prefer it. But, you know, so I would recommend people do that as well. It just saves you hassle later.
Yeah. Some ideas about promoting your group and sharing events, so tagging in local organisations. So I know up here we've got like a North Wales Public Health group that shares information about health and well-being. Also places like our local GP surgery are really, really supportive. And you know, there might be other little groups that might be interested, but make sure that you switch off as well. You don't have to answer things on a Sunday evening. You can leave it until the Monday morning or whenever you're next free, and that's when the instant response comes into play, really.
Yeah, I must admit I've been like this in the past. So, you know, we have our main MOTI session is on a Thursday. So when we were back in normal times, that would be at 7 o'clock in the evening. So I'd get home about 8:30. Then I'd be until about 12:30 or 1 in the morning, social media, getting all the posts done. More, not because I had a sense of obligation to do that, but because I was like on a high from the session and really excited about, and like how brilliant, how well it went, how everyone enjoyed it. And that carries on then when I get home. It's very hard to switch off.
Yeah.
But I stopped, well, I won't say 100%, but I largely stopped that a long time ago. And now when we're doing our Zoom Run Club sessions, I will do a tiny bit when I get home, and then I'll probably do some more Friday evening about the day before. Because yeah, it is really important. And if it is, especially if it is down to you, if you don't have like dedicated people for it, then you're doing like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you know,
Yeah.
and it can just take over. And looking at these screens all the time, we know is not good for us. Having time away from them. I mean, most of us spend 8 hours a day looking at a screen like this to start with, so you don't need another 6 hours looking at that. But so it is addictive, I think, as well. You know, there's a lot about how social media is addictive, and we're not immune to that just because we're run leaders, of course.
Yeah.
So it's really, really careful that we, even if you said to yourself, after a session, I will give myself half an hour for stuff like that, then I'm off. Or you leave it to the next day, something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so next up we've got session planning and sharing good practice. So for me as a run leader, I want to know what I'm doing for that session. And obviously your runners want to know what you're doing for the session. And it's really, really important to plan what you're doing, make sure that you have something that can be adaptable. So previous to the lockdown and where we had to book on to sessions, we didn't know who was going to turn up, so it needs to be a little bit adaptable, doesn't it? Because you need to, if you've got beginners in your group, mixed ability, then there needs to be something for everyone. some of the main points that I bring is making sure that you have a variety of runs. If you do the same route over and over again, people are going to get bored. You'll get bored as a leader. And yeah, you need to have different types of run within your sessions. So to work different elements of your running and improve in different ways, whether that's strength or speed, or even just going a little bit longer. So how about you and Sarah? What are your thoughts on your sessions?
On my session?
Carry on. No, carry on, Sarah.
I always have a couple of kind of options when I turn up, particularly pre-COVID, because like you say, you didn't know who was going to turn up, and I'd kind of throw it out to the group of, right, these are our options, where do you want to go? And I always try and make sure I've got something for the beginners, something for the intermediates, and something for the advanced. And quite often within my group, we would split up into little pods, even pre-pandemic, just so everybody's gaining something from the session, and it gives the opportunity to people to decide on that day how they feel, what they want to do. So that's how my group does it. I think Dave's got more experience with planning different types of session. I don't have that much experience in that field, so I'll let Dave go on that one.
What we I agree with everything you just said there as well. What we would find at Moti is we would have on a Tuesday night would just be a long run, but we would, well, I say a long run, 10K, but we would always wait at street corners for everyone to catch up, have a little breather, have a chat. The chat becomes like the focus of the whole evening, really. But then at the end of it, you've done 10K. But our main session is on a Thursday night, and they're nearly always some sort of interval session. But the really good thing about that is, by and large, you might be covering a small area. So, for example, we might do something like 8 times 400 meters. And then, so when you do a repetition of that, you know, the difference between the fastest and the slowest person on the night is not a hell of a lot, you know. So you just wait for everyone to finish, then you have a recovery period and you all start again. So the good thing about that was that it was suitable for all abilities. It didn't matter how fast or how slow somebody was running. So that works as well. I think there's nothing, if you want to feel out of your depth leading a session, the quickest way to doing it is like not being prepared. You know, if you turn up and you haven't really thought it through, you haven't run the route if necessary, or thought of the safety considerations, you're really gonna probably be in a little bit of a panic. You know, being prepared is the best way to, you know, be confident about the session you're gonna do. It doesn't mean you have to have had, you know, you have to have all the experience under the sun. You know, you can be a very new run leader, but everyone's capable of preparing for it, for the session. And that's the way you're going to feel confident, I think, in delivering whatever it is you do.
Yeah, definitely. And your point about intervals and doing different sessions like that is really great, because we've got a number of people that are always ahead in the front group, and we'll catch up with them eventually. But actually, it's nice to do intervals or a little relay even sometimes, because it means that different people get to talk to each other. Whereas you wouldn't necessarily, like, generally I always stay at the back and my other leader goes at the front, so you stay with the same people, which is lovely, but sometimes it's nice to have that mix and talk to other people, and you're more of a group then.
Absolutely.
And yeah, definitely I have seen groups going out, quite large groups going out, and they're all spread out, and I've driven past like runners at the back, and I think, well, where's the rest of your group? Because I know they're in a group. So that waiting at the street corners, and again having that opportunity for that social side to have a chat and wait for those people, make sure that they're safe as well, I think is really important.
What we found as well is that, I think what a lot of people say is that they come to, not always of course, because a club can serve lots of different purposes, but a lot of the reason somebody comes to club is to do stuff they would never do on their own. You know, like a hill session or a speed session. They would fight, you know, to get the motivation to go out and do that on your own, especially in the winter months. You know, that's quite a tough call. So if they know they're meeting people, they're much more likely to do it. And one session we did quite regularly is a caterpillar run. I don't know if you might know it as under a different name, but it's basically when you all run in single file and the person at the front shouts a word and you all shout it down the line, and then the person at the back runs to the front. So that's their speed element, just that little bit. And then when they get to the front, they shout something else, and then the next person at the back runs to the front, and you carry on until you've done 5K or something. What we found, that is a really fun session. And what we found is we would pick themes. So we always do this at Christmas, and you have to have a Christmas word theme. But we would split the club into, say, 5 or 6 groups. So you'd have a very speedy group, you know, coming back in like 22 minutes or something, all the way down to like 40 minutes or something. And I always remember that when we all finished and we were like, asking the speedy group, did you have a good time? Yeah, brilliant. And what theme did you pick to do it? Like, we were like Christmas presents, somebody else was like Christmas carols, and they were like, oh, none. The only thing we said was next. They're just so fast, you know. But that's a great one. But, you know, that's key to like variety. You can always make it fun.
Yeah. Okay, so we've touched on being prepared and planning your routes. I think it is so important because so much can change that's outside of your control. So I've got a variety of routes that we use if I'm at Real Runners, but also we do have a session here in Prestatyn as well, so slightly different. So there's a few more routes. And if I'm looking for a new route, I use something like Map My Run so that I can measure the distance, make sure that it's okay. But it's really, really important to go and run a new route yourself. Go and find out what the terrain is like, what else is around. So it could be about the streets, it could be the lighting. So if you're running in the evening, is that going to work in the summer and the winter? What's it going to be like if the weather changes? If you're going to have a deluge of rain, is that going to affect your routes? But also sort of before the day, I know that I've driven back from somewhere, gone past part of the route that I was going to use that evening, seen that there's loads of roadworks everywhere, which has gone right across the path that I was going to use. And I was like, right, what do I do now? So I think this is where local knowledge and wrecking it and checking and also just checking with people who might live in that area, so your group members, just checking if there's anything that's changed as well.
Absolutely. I always say this, but it's like not to be embarrassed about it and feel like you can't talk about it. So like you say, you know, if something like that happens, you just like put it out to the group. Like you might have an initial idea how to sort that out yourself, but it's, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying to the group, this is the situation. Anyone, you know, does anyone think of a good option for this, for example? You know, yeah, we had this problem on the big social run once, but luckily it was actually on Western Avenue, which is a big road in Cardiff. And on the morning, as I stood down from giving the speech to like the 130 people who were there, I had a text message saying there's roadworks on Western Avenue, the path is shut completely. And like then it was like gathering all the leaders. It's a little bit of a different situation, but gathering the leaders, sort of saying, any of you think of the best way out of this? And it was just a diversion. It was no problem, and making sure all the leaders knew about it. But that, you know, that can be the same in your club setting. If you've got multiple run leaders, you know, just make sure everyone's got the knowledge. Another one, we use a little circuit for 1K reps in Roath. And as I came around, and it was in the winter as well, as I came around the corner on one of these reps, the pavement was actually occupied by a road sweeper. So, and of course, I know that there are people hurtling round the corner about to come up, you know, and of course because very often I'll be doing the sessions with the group, but at that point it was like, right, okay, my session just has to, you've got to forget it now, and I've got to go and stand on the corner and tell people this is round the corner, be safe, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, just being adaptable is so important.
Yeah, and I think it's about what we do. A lot of our girls run to our session, so it's a good opportunity for them to recce part of the route or report back if there's ice, flooding, or if there's a busy, particularly because we use an off-road bit that's well used by cyclists and people walking, so they can say it's really busy, let's change it. So I think communication as part of a group is key. So if everybody knows they're playing a role, be it they've driven there, they've walked there to their meeting point and they've observed something, I always put it as an open discussion. You know, this is where we're going, what do we think? Yep, it's clear, it's safe, let's go for it. So I think that's key as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think
sorry.
certainly at the minute where there are so many people obviously out and about, and I know particular routes that I don't go even on my own at the minute, because they're so busy. And with all the controversy at the minute about runners and breathing, I'm not going to go into that, but I just try and keep away from other people as much as possible when I'm running, to be honest.
Yeah,
at the minute anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I know when we're talking about this stuff, like half of us is talking about like normal times and half of us is like talking about COVID times, but you know, we do have I think by default there are quite a lot of areas where currently you just cannot have a club session because you wouldn't be being responsible with social distancing. So yeah, that's I'll give a bad example actually, you know, because we're all human. But when we were allowed to do sessions in one of these windows of opportunity during COVID, we had we have a very popular place for doing a hill session, and at Moti we did the hill session there, and we were like 8 minutes from the end when another group arrived, and I think they were like a schools group or something with a couple of parents, I'm not sure, but as we were doing the reps, I said, oh, have you got a session here? And the answer was yes, and I was like, right, okay, we've just got 7 minutes left. And their response was, oh, it's okay, we'll work around you. So I carried on running thinking, right, how's this going to work? And it ended up with they were placing cones down on the road where we were doing our session.
Oh.
And yeah, and like, you know, to be totally frank about it, on reflection, I should have stopped that session. We should have just gone, but we carried on, and it was not 100% safe, and I was having to shout to the group, please, because it was like 14-year-old children doing sprinting, you know, and I was having to shout to the Moti group, when you turn, please be careful. And then of course 2 minutes later, one of the kids like runs straight into them, you know. So I think it doesn't happen often, but if you have to stop a session, you've got to stop it. And I wouldn't be afraid of doing that either. You're going to feel like wrongly, but you're going to feel like you've let the group down. How embarrassing is this? Oh, I'm in charge of a session and it had to stop. Don't worry about any of that. You know, safety is number one, absolutely number one, especially during the COVID stuff. So, you know, if it comes to it, you do have to stop, and, you know, don't worry about that. That's life, you know. Yeah,
definitely. And things come up that you don't expect. So I remember we've got this nice route that goes from Rill to a little village along the river, and we were running down there and the cows were on the path. I was like, okay. But luckily one of our group members knew exactly what to do. She was the smallest person in the group, and yet she was like making herself really big to move the cows just out the way. It's like,
Wow. Do you know
Get
what?
ready for that.
One time I decided to run home from Pontypridd, but I decided to go up the mountain. I don't know if you know the area, but up the mountain and over the mountain. And as I got to it was a road. As I got to the top, a whole herd of cows came, and I did not know what to do. And I hid behind a bush. And I think I've still got it somewhere, and I'll play it, but not publicly. I actually phoned my friends. I sent them a voicemail, and I was like, "I'm hiding behind the bush." And eventually, the only thing that saved me, because it started raining, it was like 13 miles home. The only thing that saved me is like a car came the other way and just started beeping, and they all went. But I would have still been there.
That's really interesting, actually, because well, it will already be live by the time this goes out, but there's an article coming out that I've done about countryside awareness that I've done with Natural Resources Wales. So there's information coming out about how to be safe in the countryside.
Brilliant.
Okay. So lastly on this one, just looking at sharing your sessions with other leaders, and I think and this is something that I'm going to touch on towards the end about sort of sharing ideas and things. So I think actually we might leave it until then, if that's okay. And we'll pop on to the next bit. So this is a document that we have on our website. I've actually adapted it because it was on as a PDF, which I think, I mean, certainly for me, I don't want to print off loads and loads of paper. I want to type things onto the computer. So I've actually adapted it to a Word document. And this can be saved when we look at health and safety in a minute. This could be saved onto something like Google Sheets, and then you've got it on your phone. So you've got your session plan on your phone. You don't have to take out bits of paper. But it just means that you are prepared. So what is the session about? What are the main goals? What are you trying to achieve from the session? But also, do you need any equipment, for example? So if you are doing an interval session, for example, do you need any cones? Do you need to pop them out in the middle of the road? But making sure that you include all parts of your session. So I know some groups are very good at doing their warm-ups. I know some groups don't do any warm-ups. So it's important that we make sure that we include that, include your main session, but also your cool down as well. So at least if you've got a plan, it's there, you know what you're doing, you can tell your individuals and you can prepare them, but also that you can adapt as needed as well. And you've got a toolkit then of sessions that you can build up. And if, for example, that you plan the session on a particular day and actually you can't do that session, well, you've got another one already done. So you've got that there. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I've done it in Word, as I say. I will make sure that goes onto the website so
Brilliant.
People can download that and use
it's like a, well, obviously it's a checklist, but it's like, you know, you don't know what, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So if you know, if what is the purpose of the session, unless you see that written down, that might actually pass you by. Oh, there should be a purpose, you know. It reminds you that there should be, you know.
Yeah. And one of our run leaders in our networking meeting was asking for a checklist, wasn't he? So I think there's a component there about introduction. Right, what do I need to make sure I say? Safety points, any points about the routes, checking that people are well and healthy. Have they got the right?
There was a good suggestion of Erica of on the back of the hand as well, wasn't there? You know, which is the same thing, you know. Yeah.
And some things like making sure that you're not afraid to say to somebody, actually, I don't think you're safe for this run. So I've had people turning up in the middle of winter with no high vis on or lights or anything.
Yeah.
I've got a bag of high vis in my car, and it's like, right, I'm going to go and get that, and just remind them to be safe, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so that brings us nicely into health and safety. Recording group member details. So at the minute it's quite straightforward for us, because we have to do track and trace. So I use Eventbrite to record my group, so people book onto that, and I ask for their name, contact details, emergency contact, and any health conditions. And it just means that it's up to date all the time, so, because they have to do that every time they book on. So even though they've done like a health declaration previously, things can change. So this means that it's there. I can have that on my phone. I can check them off when they arrive, or if they don't arrive, then I can make a note of it and adapt that.
Yeah, we have, I use Eventbrite, but actually a takeaway from you is actually I'm going to expand that to include all of those details, because I tend to just have, you know, I've tended to use it just for track and trace, but actually those extra elements, I think the emergency contact and is there anything I should know about injury wise, I'll be adding when we do it again.
Yeah. So just on health declarations, I know it's difficult sometimes if somebody comes to you and say, oh, I've got this problem with my knee, or I've got this condition. We can't be expected to know how to deal with everything. So I think it's really important to make sure we say, you run at your own risk, but if anything does happen, then, you know, we will support you with it, and make sure that they, you know, even if they get not permission, that's the wrong word, but the advice from their doctors or whoever, is it, if it's a particular condition, that it's just that thing about that we can't be expected to know about every single health condition
no, absolutely,
and how to deal with it.
You know, I'll not every session, but regularly I'll have somebody say I've got a bit of a niggle here, and I can't diagnose it. I can't decide whether they should run or not unless it's something really clear, you know. But I will say, you know, make sure you do this warm up, you know, if you can, unless it causes problems, you know. Take it easy, certainly to start with. And if you feel anything, you just stop. You just absolutely stop. But, you know, also I do say to them, just consider whether you should do it or not.
Yeah.
You know, because what we quite like doing actually is, especially on the intervals, is if somebody is injured, they very often will come along and they'll actually do the timing for the session, so I don't have to do it, and they still feel involved. So I'll very often say, you know, if you decide you don't want to do it, I would love to have you here cheering us, etc. You know, so if you fancy doing that, you're not going to be left out, etc. But ultimately, it is their decision, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they've got to take responsibility for that.
Yeah. And I suppose that goes back to planning as well, because if somebody tells you, oh, I've got this going on, it's like, okay, well, we're doing a hill session today. Actually, I don't think that's a really good idea.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think the planning, that's very important, that, you know, trying to always make sure you've got two leaders, particularly for that reason, someone at the front and someone at the back, because someone can start off fine and pick up an injury, and should you not have a back leader, they could be missed. Or we try and buddy up, so there's always at least two people running together, ideally somebody with a phone. That's quite important within our group. So you've always got that kind of safety net of, even if we all set off fine, someone can trip, someone can fall, someone can pull a muscle, you're covered then, aren't you?
Yeah. Great. So we've got, I'll pop back to the other slide in a minute. So we've got a risk assessment form. So this should tie in with your session plan. This will be on Word as well. I'm just in the process of converting this to Word as well to make it editable and easy to use. So it is just given an overview of your route. So are there any potential hazards on your route? So it could be about the terrain, it could be about the route that you're using in terms of other people, if people walking dogs. So I know, for example, down the prom at the minute, it's really, really busy, very busy. And there was a fire the other day, don't know how I don't know how that
Wow.
happened. So it's just looking at those things, you know, what could potentially be a hazard, what do I need to tell people, and also what to do if something changes, you know, how can you adapt? So just thinking of those points really. And just the Google Sheets just icon there was just about the recording of people's information on there and having that handy. So your risk assessments are really important, and of course you're not only doing it beforehand, you're doing it all the way through, as we've discussed as well. Okay, do you guys carry a first aid kit?
Yes, I would confess to occasionally forgetting it, but generally yes.
I carry my own little adapted one, so I carry a antiseptic wipe, plasters and tissue in my little bum bag. That's it.
Yeah. I think it's just really, really important as a first aider, and first aid is actually coming as mandatory as part of all the qualifications. So hopefully by April we'll know a little bit more about that. I've always done it as standard as a coach, do the sports first aid, because as I say, you don't know what might happen, and just that little bit of knowledge, and it might not even be related to running. It could be that you come across somebody else on your run. You know, I could never run past somebody that was quite clearly not well or injured. In fact, I had to do it after I was driving back from a run with a group, and there was a lady sitting on the side with her husband, and I couldn't tell what had happened to begin with. So I pulled over, went across the road, and what had happened was they were crossing the road, but there was like a speed hump, and because she was going so quickly, because it's a busy road, she tripped on the speed bump, and she'd cut her head, and her husband said, "Oh, I keep telling her she needs to go." And then she pulled the thing away and was like, "Yes, you need to go to the hospital." She needed stitches all across her eye. And
Nightmare.
Luckily, you know, I've done first aid and
we
had first aid kit.
Yeah, we had somebody. Well. We had a sort of trailish version of the big social run. Probably about 18 months ago. No, longer than that now. But near Corriton in Asda, you came out of the woods and you crossed a road, just a normal road, crossed the road, and one of our participants had managed like not to trip entirely on all the trail section and came onto the road, ran across the road and tripped over the curb. Luckily I was like a roaming I can't think of the word now. I was just going around in the car and stuff. I must have been injured at the time or something, but we actually had a qualified nurse with her as a marshal just by chance at that point. But actually, and she's a lovely woman as well, and she recovered brilliantly, and we were all following her recovery. But the bone in her finger was visible at the time, and no ambulance was going to be coming anytime soon. After ringing them, it was going to be like 3.5 hours or something, so somebody had to come. But you know, and you know, just keeping somebody company as well. It ended up with about 5 of us there, as you can imagine, and we had an accident with Moti once as well on a bad curb, and you know, all of that stuff is really important. And I think this first aid element, I think, well, we've identified it before, haven't we, that clubs are going to be really interested in that, and there will be a massive take up, I think. And you're absolutely right. You know, it can happen anytime. There was a thing on the news the other day about somebody collapsing on Albany Road here, and a passerby just had to help them. There's been a few things like that lately, and it can just come up at any time. Yeah. So obviously, it's something I've never done. I'll confess, I've never done. You know that feeling of awkwardness when you just feel like you don't know anything about something, so you avoid it. And I need to get over that and learn about it. And I think that it's the same for everyone really. And once there is something that Welsh athletics can steer us towards, I think there will be a big uptake.
Yeah, I think it's really important not to be scared, and if you don't know what to do, it's fine. When you phone paramedics, they're absolutely brilliant. They're so calm and will guide you through everything that you need to know. So I wouldn't be worried about it, but yeah, certainly in your first aid kit, a basic first aid kit, things like an ice pack, you know, just a little thing, but it can be, you know, that little bit of intervention that can help so much initially before you get further help. And that's it. It's like, again, we're not expected to know everything, but there is support there, and don't be afraid to phone out of hours GP or paramedics, because that's what they're there to do. So.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Emergency procedures. What do you do if a runner wanders off? Have you ever had a runner wander off?
Yes, just once, but actually it transpired that they had told the subgroup they were in. They had told them, but I wasn't aware of that. And so there was like 30 seconds of, oh my goodness. And then thankfully somebody said, no, this is absolutely fine. But that's the only time it's happened.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I've had it before, where particularly when we've had the subgroups running, you kind of see everybody go off, and I've come back late with the last group and not seen a couple of them go, and couldn't remember where they'd parked their cars, and had a bit of a panic. But luckily, just because I've got the contact forms and their contact details, I could ping them a quick message, just checking you've got home okay. Because there was a bit of a, oh, I'm not sure. Have you seen them? Have you seen that dread? Like, oh, they're running somewhere on their own. They're lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to put the onus back onto that individual as well.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
If you are going early, so sometimes we have people that need to go off to work and things. It's like, tell us if you're going early. I've had a couple of situations where one was a beginners group, and it was literally like week 1, week 2, and these 2 people just decided it wasn't for them, because they said, oh, do we have to run? And I said, well, you know, there's little bits of running, you know, little bits of running and walking. 5 minutes into it, and they just disappeared.
Oh.
And didn't say anything. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah. I was going to say exactly the same thing, that I ask people now to please let us know if you're going. What can often happen, I think, as well, is say we're running in a particular area. Well, at the time the session finishes, they might live near there, so they just go off.
Yeah.
And it's understandable, because as a participant, you don't always think, oh, somebody's going to be wondering where I am. But obviously it's really important, and the group are really good now. They just make sure they, like, you know, shout over, right, I'm off now because I live that way, and that type of thing. And it just puts your mind at rest.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I'm going to pull that. Okay, so looking at run leader wellbeing. So we had a nice session about this in our networking meeting. But I think this is really, really important, because, you know, this is not your job. This is something that you do for the love of it, and people really appreciate it. But sometimes people take a little bit too much. Sometimes it can be a bit overbearing. So it's really important to make sure that you take time to switch off and look after yourself. Make sure that, as we've said previously when we were talking about communication, that you don't have to answer every email, every text message straight away, every social media message straight away. You know, you're not expected to be on call 24 hours a day. Ask for help. So again, yeah, it could be just a small thing, as we were saying about with our route planning things, but it can be a big difference. You know, just asking for that little bit of help is so big. Don't try and be all things to all people. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I all of this is so important, and I think, like you said, you are doing this in your own free time. You're not being paid for it. I think sometimes people can forget that, and they can almost place demands on a club, forgetting that everything needs to be resourced, and that you're already spending quite a lot of time doing it. So ultimately, yes, you are doing this because it's a good thing to do. And, you know, the vast majority of people will be extremely grateful for that. It's just that sometimes people just might lose sight of the fact that this is not your 9-to-5 job, and nearly all of us have that 9-to-5 or 9-to-6 or 9-to-8 job, and we still manage to do it. You know, yeah, not trying to be all things to all people. Some people will want to add things to the club, you know, like, can we start doing this? Can we start doing that? I think the least a club can do, I think, unless it's blatantly something ridiculous, like let's go skydiving, you know, let's do that as a weekly session. But you know, you can just give it some thought, whether that is like, if you know, if that's you as an individual or a committee, a club committee. But ultimately then it is up to you. You don't have to feel like there has to be some huge justification for you reaching that decision, as long as you've given it thought and you've let people know you've given it thought. But because of this, we're not able to do that. You know, that's fine. You know, I wouldn't be worrying yourself that you're not meeting these demands sometime, you know. Yeah, it's really important. And we've got a point there, you know, it's rewarding. If it's stressful, try and identify the problem. This should not be stressing you out. You know, something's up if it's stressing you out. So it's think about what it is. Are people expecting too much? Or, you know, or are you forgetting this? Maybe it's not an outside thing at all. Maybe you're forgetting the fun side of it. Maybe it's time to remind yourself a little bit. And also, we've talked about social media switching off. Maybe it's time that you just took a bit of time out, not spending hours doing social media or trying to think of new amazing things the club can do. You know, you're delivering something brilliant anyway, and that's why people turn up. So you're doing good anyway.
Yeah. And I think it's important as well to be honest. You know, if something's going on at home, at work, things like that, that you need to take that time out, then do that, because otherwise you're going to burn out. And as you say, you're going to be stressed, and you don't want to be stressed over something that you enjoy, which is the whole point of being a run leader and running.
Yeah, absolutely. I with Moti, you know, and with Moti for a lot of the time, I'm the coach, and there isn't anyone else. So I run the sessions, and you know, luckily for me, I went through a very bad time with family health, but actually doing the club was my time of normality, you know. But it's a very thin line, really. So for me, like, doing these sessions, keeping that as my normality was my focus. But that could very easily for somebody be, they need to actually be thinking about the other stuff and a bit less about the club stuff.
Yeah.
And it's very important to recognize that, as you say. And don't be coming to, you've got a hell of a lot on your mind and you're coming to club day and you're trying to meet what you think are your obligations for club day, and that is making you very anxious, etc. You know, it's just worth thinking, right, what can we do to help this situation, because I've got a lot going on at the moment. And that is fair enough, you know.
Okay, so one of the ways that we can help our run leaders is by networking and learning all the time. So some of these things I'm going to take forward after the conference. So there's a lot of things that I've got planned that I'll be asking leaders feedback from and putting things into action. But some of the things that we've already got at the minute are our Learf network on Facebook, which I think is great. People ask questions. I've asked a question about sleeping, you know, sleeping in training, and the response and the information that you get back is amazing. And it's not being afraid to ask questions, whether it's about a session, about yourself, something that's happening within a group. And that's the point. Actually, I'll just bring up, I didn't bring up about safeguarding, and if you've got a welfare issue within your group or your club. If it's an affiliated club, then you should have two welfare officers, a male and female welfare officer. If you're a Run Wales group, if you contact Run Wales participation officer, so either myself or Hannah, and then we can put you in touch with our safeguarding lead. There will be more information coming on safeguarding in terms of Run Wales over the next few weeks. But if there's any issues at all in terms of things that we've had some issues between leaders or something that a particular group member has done, please, you know, contact us and we will help. Sorry, just going back to Learf networking. So we have a networking event roughly every 6 weeks, and what I'm trying to do with those is alternating between just giving updates and a chance to chat and anything that's coming up from groups, but also having particular focus. So we had a wellbeing event a few weeks ago. I've got some more things sort of lined up and some guest speakers hopefully coming up. Not always necessarily to do with leading, but you know, things that are relevant to a leader as a whole and groups and things. We've also got the Learf newsletter, which every time, whenever somebody has done the Learf course, they're automatically added to that. And we're just going to be updating our Facebook page, because if you're not getting that newsletter, there'll be like a sign up page for that on our website. So again, that will have information and resources and links to courses, links to officials courses as well. So if your group or club wants to put on an event, there'll be information about that. So some other things, and this goes into the CPD element, is looking out and sharing events and webinars about different aspects of leading and sessions. It might be about exercises, it might be about different types of sessions, it might be about nutrition. So more of those will be coming. And of course, if anybody has knowledge of anything that's going on, please share it on the Learf networking sites. And then the last one, and this is one that I'm really keen to get going as soon as we're able to get out in groups, but also using our Learf networking on Facebook, is about a borrowing scheme almost, and supporting each other in our groups. So we have our Run Leader champions in place, so they're a port of call. So if you're looking for new ideas, for example, you know, could you go to another local group and just be part of that group and learn from another run leader? Or perhaps a run leader can actually come to your group and lead part of a session, give you some ideas that way. Again, at the minute we can do that virtually via our different platforms, but it's something that I'd like to do in person at some point.
Yeah. I'm really excited about this, and I can't wait till we can do this, because I find it really interesting going to different clubs anyway. It's something I want to do. I've been meaning to do it with Lisweri Runners for ages, and a few other clubs, and Seriously Mad Runners, another one. So I can't wait just for personal reasons to do it, but also I just think it will be so good. I feel like our Learf network now has just really developed, and I feel it really has a proper community feel to it. We used to get that when we had the face-to-face Learf meetings, but it didn't feel so much online. It was only like at the meetings where you're like, oh wow, we're all together, it's amazing type of thing. But now it's like it's via the Zoom meetings and the groups, and I think that's just going to continue developing. So when we can actually visit each other's clubs, and as you say, as you mentioned on one of our recent run leader calls, you know, we had one of our fellow run leaders saying, oh, it's been a while since I've led a group, you know, I'm a bit like little nervous about it. What tips can you give me? That type of thing. And that meeting was brilliant for him. I think he acknowledged that was brilliant to give some good ideas. But then expanding on that, you know, anyone can like come to somebody else's session and just be a participant in it, or maybe a guest run leader, you know, and that's just going to really help people, I think. And I do think it's easy to say it, but we are all part of one running community. I am not into this like, well, no, this is our club, we keep this to ourselves, we're not going to tell anyone else about it, you know. I want it to be the opposite of that. If you've got a brilliant idea, okay, do it first, you know, but then share it, and we can all benefit then.
Yeah, and I think that's about when I did the LERF course, we did a lot of the exercise because I'm pretty new. I've never been to part of a club or anything. So a lot of it was quite over my head. I didn't understand. So for me, even as a run leader, having done it a few years, I'd benefit going to a club and seeing it in practice, seeing it with real people, not a teacher telling you what to do.
Yeah.
There's something about being a kinesthetic learner, seeing it in action and seeing it actually with the real people in a real environment, not in a hall, will really benefit, I know, me and lots of other people.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, right. Thank you so much for all your input. Any sort of last thoughts really on being a run leader before we take some questions?
You go first, Sarah.
I'm going to say, and this is still a learning progress because I'm not very good, don't be afraid to say no. I think, and that's my biggest thing I've had as a run leader, is I want to please everybody, I want to support everyone, and you'll easily pick up injuries because you're running every day at different paces and different distances, and you can't please everyone. You just be mindful of your own personal goals. Don't stop doing those to fit other people's runs in. I think that's really, really important, because you'll soon fall out of love of running if you don't have your own personal goals you want to achieve as well. So don't be afraid to say no every now and then, and keep your own goals in mind. That's my tips.
They are so good, so good. I would say one thing which I always bang on about is you've got a supportive audience. So it's not like when you're taking a club session, it is not like you are standing up in the House of Commons, you know, trying to justify tax rises or something to a hostile audience. It's the opposite. I always say that actually when I think about things like this and presentations to like audiences of runners, people are on your side, you know, and in a club they have come along because you're delivering something that they can't do on their own. So you are doing good for them. So, you know, just to remember that can give you that little boost of confidence, and to know, like I always say as well, don't be afraid to be open, you know, with your club members, you know, because you are only human. And I actually think sometimes trying to look perfect is what can make people clearly not perfect. Where actually when you're open, that gives people confidence. I think it shows that you have the confidence to be open, maybe about not being confident, you know. But that gives people confidence in you. So yeah, I'm not sure I could summarize that, but that's it.
Okay, brilliant. And just for me, it's just like there's support out there. That's what we're here to do, and I'm really, really keen to build on that. And I use the analogy about getting your driver's license. You get your license, but then you start learning, and you carry on learning from there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have some time for some questions. But thank you so much, Sarah and Dave. It's been great to chat with you. I hope that everyone finds it really useful.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks for asking.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.